Yeah, video finished literally last night. This was a challenge. I mentioned before that I worked on this episode and the next episode at the same time. And I also mentioned that for reasons, I did the next one first, Young Man Cut Down on His Prime. And that's because I thought that was going to be much more difficult. I brainstormed both of them and thought, okay, how is the video going to work? What are the themes going to be? What's the basic narrative going to be? And I looked at the two of them and I thought, Young Man Cut Down on His Prime is just trickier. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get that work. Actually, and I'll obviously talk more about that in the next one, it was kind of a delight and I was really amazed with the results that I got. With already on to the next thing, I mean, for example, when I started generating the videos from the Midjourney images that I'd made, I got the results back and I was like, I don't think this is usable. I think the quality is just not there. And these videos are rough around the edges, and I'll talk more about that in a bit. But there's rough around the edges, and then there's just so kind of janky, it's distracting. And that's what I thought I was going to get. But I just did it again and again and again and did loads and loads of different takes, loads of different generations, loads of, whatever. And then after a while, weirdly, Pika Labs, the software that I was using, I think started to figure things out. So for example, as you'll see in the video, I'm generating the backdrops behind the car, and sometimes two things are moving in different directions. The car is moving in one direction and then there are planes moving in another direction. Pika couldn't figure that out to begin with. But as I started doing it, after a while, I think it's sort of whatever algorithm is working, got the sense that, oh, okay, if there's a road, he wants it going in this direction. And if there's a plane, he wants it going in that direction. And I had to kind of isolate bits of them and say, this plane is moving from the left frame to the right frame, and kind of educate it like that. And after a while, it seemed like it was like, oh, okay, I kind of get the hang of that. So that was one challenge. Then when I started putting things into Final Cut Pro and actually making the video, I thought this just looks so unrealistic. Like, maybe I can get away with it looking a bit kitsch, that the inside of the car looks so different to the outside of the car. But gradually, and here's where I feel like years of recording music, recording audio in digital audio workstations has really helped, as I was able to kind of apply the same principles I'd use in that, of checking references and saying, well, how should it look? And they're saying, all right, well, maybe it needs this and maybe it needs this. And then just layering them in very gently so that you hopefully don't notice them, but they all add up to a more cohesive picture. So there was a lot of that. And then, at the end of it all, there was just a lot of going through the entire music video and having to fix things frame by frame. If I was going to do it again, I'd really pay attention to where my thumbs were on the steering wheel, because that and masking out the background kept interfering with each other, and I just had to kind of mask my thumb into the shot all the way through. Ducks. I think we're safe. So yeah, it was a challenge. It was a lot more work in the end than Young Man Cut Down on His Prime. Okay, well, let's actually get down to it. Let's ask the question. I think it all came together in the end, but I'm not entirely sure. Something that I realized when it was finished is that I went into this with really high expectations. I'm not working on someone else's song. I'm not working on something that was a hit and some really talented artist did like 85% of the work and I'm just doing a little bit of, polishing in my own way. This isn't a traditional track where there's a lot of adaptation, a lot of research, but still I can always say, well, I'm working with the song I was given. This is all my creation, and I set myself the challenge of doing something that was just new and fresh. And I'm not sure whether or not I achieved that. I'm not sure whether or not I'm going to come back and think, it's fine. It's just fine. Because I've had my head down and been focusing on it a lot, it's difficult for me I don't have that perspective. I don't know how I'm going to feel about it coming back to it. I may sort of think, oh wow, it works a lot better than I thought it did, which I often feel. I may come back and be like, God, you missed this thing and this thing, which is just dragging it down. So yeah, I don't know. But at the moment, I feel like when I think about all the things I was trying to achieve beforehand, I look at it and I'm like, yeah, I feel like I hit that beat. I feel like I hit that beat. And ultimately, when it comes to doing something new and something fresh, I feel like there's still sort of a story, a narrative in the song, and I need to tell that, and I'm kind of restricted by that to a certain extent. You can make the choice to say, all right, screw the narrative, just do something wild and crazy, and that's fine, but that's not what I'm trying to do in this song, or most of the time, really. Like, the story takes precedence. So, yeah, who knows? Maybe I'll like it in the future, maybe I won't. In terms of what went well, there's one thing that I was really happy with, one decision that I made. And I kind of made a joke about how I was thinking about... I'd been listening to an Adam Savage podcast where he was telling his son that if you want to make something that you're proud of, you probably need to make it 3 times. And I remember him saying, young people never want to do that. And I remember thinking, you know, I see where he's coming from, but I probably don't need to do that because I think I can make this work. I am so glad that I didn't just make the thing that I'd done work. The footage I got the first time involved me driving around an empty car park, and what I got was the natural light moving on my face. And that I just didn't even bother to try to replicate. The more you look at the already onto the next thing video, the more you can see that it's unreal and it's kind of full of mistakes. You know, I tried to mask my thumb into the shot, but still this collar is jittering in and out. My ear is occasionally jittering in and out. Yeah, the more you look, the more you can see wrong with it. But what I got from reshooting was actually my face in focus in good light and the whole car in kind of fairly good light. And then I was able to play with that. Had I had something which was underexposed, yeah, it was underexposed, and the focus wasn't particularly reliable, I've had real problems figuring out the autofocus for this camera. I think I've done it now, but for a lot of this episode and the next episode, I didn't. That first footage, I didn't really have it figured out. And I thought, well, maybe it's in focus enough. But yeah, coming back to it, I ended up with much more sort of bland, less characterful footage. And that's exactly what I needed to put the character in later. So that went well. I was really happy with that. Well, for me, there's always this threshold of how many problems do you leave in? How many problems do you leave unfixed? There comes a point, certainly at the beginning, when it just makes sense to say, you know what, I'm not happy with this, I'm going to do the whole thing again. But as you get further and further into the process, that becomes more and more disruptive. You really need to think, okay, am I going to just pull up all the floorboards and redo this? And if I do, can I guarantee I'm going to end up with something better? Maybe this is as much as I can manage with my skills and budget. So you've got to make that trade-off. I can spend time looking at this song and looking at the music video and feeling like, I wish I'd fixed that, I wish I'd fixed that. That said, and I know I'm talking about kind of what went badly, but the flip side of that is when I look at the video at the moment, I do feel like if I was to fix these little details, it wouldn't make a substantive difference. Now, if this was professional work I was doing for a client, that's a different story. You know, if it's just for professional consumption, I think we all understand there's a kind of basic professional standard like you would expect in TV and film. And if you see something that's shonky, it just takes you out of it. So that's not what I'm aiming for. And that's why I can feel like I don't think that fixing these little things would have moved the needle. So, you know, it slightly bothers me, but what can you do? What went badly? Something else that I'm wondering about. I've talked a bit about AI here. I'm going to talk a lot more about AI, and particularly the sort of legal and ethical implications in the next episode. But I will say, I found Midjourney to be such a useful tool, but I'm worrying about how much it's possible for me to take it on myself to avoid ripping other people off. So for one shot, I was editing the sky full of aeroplanes, and I generated a few different Midjourney images with kind of different prompts. And when I got them together and was, you know, looking between them for various reasons, I realized that chunks of them were exactly the same. You could take them and just copy them and paste them on, you know, but the prompts were different. And it did make me think, is that just the algorithm? I was like, I know how to do a bunch of planes. Or has it just found someone else's photo with a bunch of planes and be like, this works, I'm going to copy and paste it. from the perspective of being a creator, if Midjourney is gonna do that, I can't really rely on it. You know, I can't rely on it to not steal from other people. So that's a concern. I mean, that said, I don't know whether that's what's going on, so at the moment I'm just gonna keep my eye on it and see how it goes. Finally, in terms of what went badly, there's the same old thing of it just took ages, but actually that leads into the next point. I feel like I'm starting to make peace with how long these episodes take. And part of that is because it's occurred to me that in terms of playing the YouTube game, what I can do is make these feature-length episodes, and then I can just cut them up into little bits and do a clips channel and have that as a more sort of bite-sized way of getting what for me is kind of the most interesting part, which is the stuff that I've learned. All the little ideas, the things that I've tried, whatever, I can, as I say, I can kind of cut them up. So I don't feel so bad about like producing these episodes on a weekly basis, which is just not doable. There's so much that's got to be done. I feel like these work being long. I may change my mind. I haven't actually published these on YouTube yet. I don't know how it's going to go. YouTube may just punish me, may just squash me if this is just not what people want, in which case I'll adapt. But it's also been the case that trying to figure out the pilot in the middle of a pandemic, becoming a parent and all these various other things, day job and whatever else, it took me 2 years to get that first one put together. Now, again, I want to qualify, I wasn't spending 2 years doing 9 to 5 on this, but it was when I had time. I now think, roughly speaking, that getting 2 episodes done has taken me about 9 months, and that's still a crazy amount of time. But when I've looked at what the problem has been, I've been able to get all the different aspects of these episodes done relatively quickly. It's just been because it's, not full-time job and not childcare and whatever else, it's got to be lower on the list of priorities. Like a few months ago, one of my kids got sick. Sick enough so that we had to take her into hospital. And that basically just knocked out a month of work, just the way that it panned out. And there's nothing I could have done about that in terms of being more time efficient. That's just kind of how life works. But yeah, I sort of realized it's going to take as long as it's going to take. It's just fun though. I really enjoy doing it. And so I think it would be more of a sweat if I felt like, oh God, I'm not happy with it. I'm not happy with the results that I'm getting. For me, this is about capturing the joy of the creative process of making stuff. And I enjoy looking back at them when I edit it and put it all together. I'm like, yeah, I like the vibe. So yeah, that's where we're at. There we go. Using my sophisticated lighting technology, I've closed the curtain a bit. I just want to say thank you for making it all the way to the end, assuming you did make it all the way to the end. And if you just jumped in for the ending video, that's fine too. I want to mention about band names, because when you are a musician and you're putting your music out in the world and your name is James Bell, that's an incredibly generic name. It's kind of similar to the kid from Billy Elliot. And so the way that I try to make it a little bit more memorable is using band names even when it's just me. I use a different band name for each project. So for cover versions, it's James Bell and the Algorithm. And for original material, just really to be a bit more specific and memorable, it's James Bell and the 0.2. So that's that. And I'm going to finish up with one last point that I only noticed when editing. You might be lost out on a post-apocalyptic highway, you might be chased by terrifying feral gangs, or you might be trapped in some kind of twisted simulation of the Cotswolds, but still, you should really wear a seatbelt. Already on to the next thing. Let's watch the video.